In this episode, I talked to Sarah Matthews from Truro High School. You'll find out why a girl's education is best. You'll also find out why you should not be paying any attention to league tables whatsoever. And we also touch on the topic of the increase in rising costs for schools and rising fees for parents. So let's get into it. How does removing the boys from their lives, how does that improve their experience?
Removing the boys from the classroom just liberates them.
You've taken the school out of the league tables.
Actually, it was driven by our students. And I'm so proud to say that because we listen to student voice. We're talking about a Prime Minister who didn't want his own son's GCSE journey to be disrupted and made some interesting decisions around that. I'm sure you saw.
So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
As we were just saying, it's been quite a few years since we saw each other. So just by way of an introduction, you're a former teacher of religious studies, a former examiner, house mistress. You've worked in Hong Kong, which is where we met, and most predominantly worked in the UK, and currently head at award-winning Truro High School, and governor and mother of two.
That's right. Yeah,
welcome,
absolutely.
Welcome, Sarah. So nice to see you.
Thank you.
So what we want to do is we want to discuss UK education and some of the issues and topics that are topical that parents are interested to know about. So I thought it'd be nice to take us back. Can you just explain to us about your own education?
Yeah, actually, I was state comprehensive educated in the UK, but my family saw the value of education. I think that's always the most important thing, and something that I see in Hong Kong all the time, that people really see the value of education. And I had the liberty of pursuing what I loved. My family were always really supportive. And so when I went to university, it was philosophy for me, philosophy, ethics, religious studies. I've always had an interest in people and why people think as they do and why they behave as they do. So sort of an anthropologist at heart. And so I pursued that. And that led me into teaching, which is the best job in the world.
Did you go directly into teaching?
I did. Interestingly, I hadn't planned to. I planned to work in PR, and I applied for graduate training schemes, and then slightly embarrassingly wanted to stay at university for an extra year with some of my friends. And so thought, do you know what? I'll do the teacher training, and then absolutely fell in love with it. The difference that you make, just the way that no 2 days are the same. And it's just, since then I've not looked back.
So how much teaching do you currently do in your role, or is it none?
It's limited. I have a big job, so have lots of very important activities to do, but I do try and stay connected. So actually I teach year 6. I work in all through school. So my school takes students from age 3 right through to 18. And so I do pop-ups with them in terms of, we call it big thinking or critical thinking workshops as they get older. And then I consistently teach year 6 so that I know them really well before they come through into the senior school. And I teach them for a sort of, we call it big thinking, but it's critical thinking, religious studies combination.
Oh, nice. I know some heads do like to do a little bit of teaching and some don't so much.
Stay connected. It's the best way to hear student voice, to spend time in the classroom with them.
As it on the shop floor, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just to know how our teachers are feeling. Yeah, I do marking, I write reports. It's really important that I understand how education is working from that side as well. But unfortunately, don't have as much time to teach as I used to have.
Do the pupils feel lucky to have a class with the head of the school, or slightly frightened?
I think they love it. They love it. So I tend to go in with big questions that I say that we don't necessarily know the answer to. And, things like, if you paint over a window, is it still a window? Which sounds like a really simple question.
Sounds like an Oxbridge interview question.
It sounds straightforward until you start unpacking it. And then they love the idea that they twist their thinking in knots, and it's all about flexible thinking and critical thinking and being willing to change your mind. And it's about the skills that we're teaching the students in our care. And so they really love that idea that they can't get it wrong, that they can take a risk and engage.
So is that a graded class? How do you measure?
Yeah, no, it's not. And actually from September, we're introducing a compulsory critical thinking class for all of our GCSE age students. It'll be an hour a week. And with that, they'll be looking at debate. They'll be looking at extended writing. They'll look at some philosophy, some ethics, current affairs. So it will change constantly, applying critical thinking looking to AI as something that we are investigating as a school at the moment. And it's just really good for their oracy skills, for their flexible thinking, problem solving, all of those. For us, we're very much whilst qualifications are vital, we know that we're very much a skill development school as well.
I know we'll get into that a little bit later. Just want to go back and ask you, your LinkedIn profile states that you're determined to make a positive difference. So I guess we could spend the next hour unpacking that, but just briefly, what does that mean?
It means that I care about all young people. I sit at director level of the GSA, the Girls' School Association, and we're all about amplifying girls' voice. But I'm a governor in co-educational schools as well, because I just think in a world where you can be anything, try to make a positive difference. Try to create a world that will be better for everybody. So for me, it's a bold vision.
It's a lofty goal.
It is, but I do feel that one child at a time, I'm making a difference, and through my connections globally as well. So I do some teacher training out in West Africa. We invite some teachers from Nigeria, from Ghana to come and visit my school. We've got connections in Cambodia and also in Brazil. And so making that little tiny difference around the world that might hopefully then resonate is what I hope to do.
So you were state educated yourself, but then you've always worked in the private sector? Or?
I worked in the state sector for about 2 years. And whilst I loved it, I couldn't miss the opportunity to head into Girls Only, which is where I then went. And all the wonderful things about Girls Only that were there. So I did move in, and then from there, the liberty and the freedom, and the way that you can craft a curriculum that you think is absolutely right for the students is what's kept me in the independent sector. Plus the opportunity to work places like Hong Kong, which is a place that I love.
Do you mind if I ask, what have you decided to do with your own children? What's their pathway?
So my own children are independently educated. I do, working in the independent sector, I see the difference. I think there is a huge difference.
Please enlighten us. What are those key differences?
Particularly soft skills. I think the freedom that you have, the way that the independent sector really has a focus on finding the talent of every single child, having the smaller class sizes. And one of the students I'm welcoming to my school just after February half term is currently in a primary school class of 38. She's going to move into a much, much smaller class than that.
That's not the norm nowadays in a state school, is it?
It depends. I think different state schools are different, but she is absolutely down in Cornwall. She's in a class of 38, and she's getting lost. And I don't want that for my children. But also just the soft skill development, the confidence, that they have the access to opportunities that they wouldn't have, and the individual attention. I think it does make all the difference. And I want that for every child. I wish that were the case in the state sector, but at the moment, I don't see that it is. And that's why we partner with lots of state schools actually to try and provide opportunities that they might not have. So we have a brilliant Go Cook programme where we invite year fives from across Cornwall to come in and create Chinese feasts, actually. So we do what we can.
Yeah, I mean, there is the argument, isn't there, that it does just create a divide, in such a divide in society by giving the children of wealthier families those opportunities, and then those opportunities that just snowballs into. There's been a bit of a discussion recently about the universities having quotas for state school students and then reversing those quotas. I think everyone's not quite sure how that's going. What's your feeling?
I think it's really tough because everybody wants all children to have access to the same opportunities. And I think universities are working really hard on that. But if you take the example of Oxbridge, 7% of children in the UK are independently educated, but about 30% around that are going into Oxford and Cambridge from the independent sector.
And many of them from the same 10 or 20 schools in the UK.
So, I mean, we have offers from particularly Oxford each year, and that's really exciting. But it's that idea that every child should go to the place that's right for them, and I would like to think that universities are putting that at the heart of their decisions. Many of our students receive bursaries and scholarships, and so I would hate to think that a child from a disadvantaged background who was on 100% fee remission at my school would be kept out of Oxford or Cambridge from a disadvantaged background simply because they'd had the opportunity to be with us.
But that would probably balance itself out in the UCAS application form where we get into contextual admissions and all of that, which we're not going to get
Hopefully.
into today, unless you particularly want to. But yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I obviously, I'm fortunate enough to send my children to private education for all the reasons that you've just stated.
Let's take a quick break to talk about something that can make all the difference for your child's educational journey. I'm thrilled to share that this episode is sponsored by Top Schools, your trusted partner in navigating the complex world of school applications. If you're aiming for a top independent school in the UK, Top Schools offers personalised consulting to ensure your child finds the very best fit with a guaranteed outcome. From identifying those best fit schools to crafting standout applications to invigilating the entrance exams, the expert team is with you every step of the way. Ready to take control of your child's future? Visit topschoolsadmissions.com or click the link in the show notes to learn more and book a consultation today. Use the code DESTINATION for 20% off. That code is DESTINATION for 20% off personalised support for entry into a top independent boarding school in the UK. Now, back to our conversation.
I mean, in terms of inclusivity, let's turn... for socioeconomic, of course, we would love to welcome all children from all backgrounds. That's not always possible. And you've alluded to the term fit a number of times, which is something that I use a lot. How does that show itself in terms of the diversity of students within your school, although they're all girls?
They are, indeed.
What sort of diversity do you see?
So I think it's really important for children to be globally minded. And so for me, one of the reasons I'm out here in Hong Kong is that we love welcoming students from Asia to our school. I travel out to West Africa for that reason as well. I can't get everywhere in the world, but we have students from places like Mexico, from Germany, from France, from Malaysia. It's really, really important that we have that global mindedness. And the way that children are going to develop global mindedness is to have connections. And so global connections is really important. Again, socio and economic background, the bursaries are means tested at my school, which allows access from students that wouldn't normally be able to access the school. But as you say, it's girls only, so we don't have any boys. That's the only diversity we're lacking. But we do have lots of conferences where we bring them in and the girls mix freely with boys with great confidence.
I went to a girls-only school. I did not mix with boys with great confidence.
Oh, that's a shame.
Not at all. Until I was a lot older.
I think times perhaps have changed.
Yes,
I know you're very young, Ruth, but absolutely.
Thank you for saying so.
I think girls' schools have transformed, actually.
Well, I think I want to actually come on to the idea that there's a lot of negative press about boarding schools. There's a lot of celebrities that speak up about abuse and neglect and trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, I've actually got quite a number of examples which I won't go into, but I think boarding school syndrome is something that, and I feel that's very unfair. I feel that we're talking about maybe when they were sending their children aged 7 or 8, which is very young, to boarding school, thousands of miles away from their families, and I think that's not fair to frame the conversation about boarding schools in that way these days. So what are the positives? I know that you have a small boarding contingent, but what, in your view, are the positives of a boarding school in 2024, 2025?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing it up. I think, again, the focus being on boarding schools, but actually it was the same in day schools back in those days.
Yes.
The safeguarding expectations were not what they are today, and nothing could be more important. Literally nothing could be more important.
And all these stories that they're getting raked up or...
Yeah, and they absolutely happened in day schools too. But I think because of the inquiries looking specifically into boarding, I think it's really, really tough to think about what we are now in the modern day, where safeguarding is the number one priority. I know, speaking about my own school, it's warm, it's nurturing. The girls talk about how they feel like a family, and they really do. They behave like a family. We've just had the most amazing Chinese New Year feast and fireworks in the garden, because we're allowed to do that legally in the UK. And they have the most amazing time. They build independence. They're globally minded because they have friends from around the school, not around the school, around the world, from all around the world. And that idea that they are able to access a kind of education that they wouldn't be able to have in their home country. If I take the example of Mexico, the girls love the freedom that they have because of the safety and security of Cornwall. We're one of the safest places to live in the UK. When I think about the students who join me from certain backgrounds in Asia, and they love the access to the creative and performing arts. I give the example of Jasmine. When she joined us, she'd never sung, she'd never danced, she'd never acted. She is one of the most phenomenal musical theatre actresses I've ever met in my whole life.
From where?
She's from Hong Kong, but she didn't opt. She joined in year 10. She didn't opt for drama. She didn't opt for music because she had no idea, because the access to those kind of opportunities wasn't there at the school that she went to. And I know not all schools are the same in Hong Kong, but the one that she went to. So those opportunities that they perhaps might not have had, and the ability to have the mentoring, and for parents to be able to concentrate on other things. You know, we have a lot of forces boarders in the UK, and they have the stability and the security of knowing that their education will be continuous.
I've got a girl coming on to the podcast, and my aim is to have a number of students to have the student voice as well, which I think is really important. So my own daughter is rounding up some friends because they just had a blast. They had such fun.
Oh, I can certainly introduce you to some.
Yeah, please.
There's a student, actually, we recorded a video of her as she was leaving. She left on the 31st of January. She came for a term from Germany, and she was just effusive about the benefits that it had given her. And now she actually wants to come back in September. She's had to go back into Germany. She was a one-term placement, but then managed to extend by a month. So came back for another month after Christmas. And she couldn't believe the difference, and now wants to she's got to go back and finish her German education for the rest of this academic year, but she wants to come back in year 12 because she can see, and her parents can see, the transformation in her as well, in terms of her confidence and her academic growth. But they attributed that to being a girls-only environment. So.
We'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
But in terms of boarding, what was I going to say? I've lost my train. There are for some students, it probably doesn't work out, or maybe it's not the right choice when they're considering boarding. I mean, what advice do you have for parents in deciding to send their children to board or not?
Yeah, I think actually we find that it works out for all of them.
Do you?
I think some of them are reticent at first, particularly if they're shy, but then you see tremendous development in their soft skills. And I think the girls who are older and have been with us for a few years, they welcome them in, they welcome them to the family, they build their confidence, the leadership opportunities and the nurture that the students provide each other is just fantastic. And so for us, we've never really had a situation where it hasn't worked out. And I think it's a certain type of family that chooses that for their daughter, and parents supporting that it might be wobbly at first. There's usually what we call the honeymoon period, where they're blissfully happy for 2 weeks, and then the reality of living somewhere else kicks in. And I remember that myself when I lived in Hong Kong. I was with my own family, but missing bits of the UK. At that point, I used to head off to some Western supermarkets, get a taste of home.
But that's where, bringing boarding schools into the modern day, talking about boarding schools today is so very different. And again, the stories that we hear, parents didn't see their children for a whole year or at least half a year, but you're sending children home relatively frequently.
Yeah, and we make it as easy as possible for them. So we take them to the airport, we pick them up. During the pandemic, actually, we had girls from Hong Kong stay with us for 2 years. So we actually took...
We'd rather not talk about the pandemic. We're traumatised from that, at least I am.
Yeah, we took the decision to open us effectively as a children's home because they felt safe with us and wanted to stay. So... and we have a wonderful, vibrant, we don't actually have Saturday school, so we have a vibrant activity programme at the weekend, which keeps them busy. Like every Friday night, they have an activity. Every Saturday, every Sunday, they can opt into activities. So a little different to some other boarding schools for Saturday school. And that means that they're doing things that they love. They're horse riding, they're ice skating, they're doing escape rooms. And if anything, what's really embarrassing is we sometimes have to remind them to call home because parents are at home with an empty nest and the girls are having a blast with their friends and keeping busy. It's not that they don't love their families, of course they do, but they're just busy and active and fulfilled. So
no, I always lived by the mantra that if no news is good news, if you're not hearing from them, they'll be having fun, because if there was something wrong, the house parent would call to let you know.
We do try and encourage them to call home. I did have to once remind a girl that she hadn't yet phoned home on her birthday and that her parents were pretty important. But again, it was because her friends had created the most amazing day for her and she was actively involved and time got away.
Yeah, nice. I mean, you've touched on it, but well-being is obviously a bit of a buzzword that we didn't really hear 10 years ago. You've talked about safeguarding. I mean, how does a school, presumably with high expectations, you've got small classes. I presume the small classes make a big difference because
Huge.
you know that child and you see that child.
Yeah.
But how do you balance presumably high expectations with nurturing, you mentioned earlier?
It's really important. I think making learning exciting and engaging, I think that's the key. We never make any decision without taking into account wellbeing as well. Our whole school day is structured on wellbeing principles. So we have a really long lunchtime of an hour and 15 minutes to make sure that everybody can do something they love in the middle of the day. And we've got more activities at the end of the day because wellbeing standards say that you should do something you love for at least an hour a day. So we've got about 80 different clubs and activities that the girls can be getting involved in. Our homework planner isn't just a homework planner, it's a wellbeing journal. So we worked with teen psychology experts to put together a wellbeing journal so they'll write down their homework, but would they ever open a wellbeing journal? They don't think they need it, but if it's there inside, so every day, so we're engendering positive mental health habits through the use of our planner every day, but also just making sure if learning is meeting them where they're at, and if it's interesting and it's engaging and it's fun, which again, when you've got smaller class sizes, it can be much more hands-on. Again, dare I say it, girls only. You can do really exciting activities that are tailored to what the girls really love. And then that makes it much more engaging, which lowers the stress.
So how is removing boys from a girl's life in those critical teenage years? I mean, being a teenager is much more complicated for the teenagers now, I think, than when we were teenagers. But how does removing the boys from their lives, how does that improve their experience?
Yeah, I would say we only remove them from their classrooms.
True. Okay.
Because a lot of my girls have got brothers and lots of them have got lovely male friends. When we have balls, dashing boyfriends appear. We're not quite sure where they came from, but they're very lovely people. And we have conferences all the time where they mix with boys.
True.
But removing the boys from the classroom just liberates them completely. It's a freedom, it's a sisterhood. They support one another, they build each other up. But also we can tailor our learning to the needs of the girls. So we can plan really exciting, fun lessons that they will think is brilliant. In terms of brain development, I would argue that girls assess risk sooner than boys, and that's borne out with neuroscience. And so boys are more willing to lead in a classroom and blurt things out and go in without assessing the risk, whereas a girl will tend to sit back and say something if it needs to be said. So if you don't have the boys in the classroom, the girls become the leaders. Removing the gender stereotypes, I'm still horrified by the statistics of how more likely you are to take certain subjects if you're a girl in a girls' school. So 25% of my students went on to study medical related degrees last year. Some of the most popular A-levels every year are maths and chemistry. So those kind of things that we just don't even think about. Our girls develop cars. So we have green power engineering. Don't know if you've seen those. They build and race cars on Formula One tracks. We're actually the only school in the country that's registered as a car club with Motorsport UK. And it's so liberating for them. They are regularly one of the only girls' schools there. And there's a huge number of boys that are on those Formula One tracks, as you can imagine.
Sure, yeah.
But the girls at my school are the engineers. They are the football players. And so taking away those kind of boundaries that we like to think don't exist in society, but clearly do.
Of course they do, unfortunately.
So the statistics will show you. So the studies that have been done, I think the most recent one in soft skills development showed that girls in girls' schools are more mentally tough, they're more resilient, they're more flexible in their thinking, they have higher levels of confidence. I think that was in 2021. In 2024, we were told that girls attain up to 10% higher in their GCSEs. So academic achievement, but also just the freedom to dance at break time, to do cartwheels on the lawn, to not worry about what you look like, to take away all those kind of that culture of comparison that exists, particularly within their mobile phones, and just allow them to grow up a little bit slower. And I think that's the beauty of it. I'll stop because I could go on all day.
I'm sure. No, I'm just thinking of my own girls only education. And it's funny that I'm sort of remembering some of the negative things, but as you're saying there, I do recognise some of the characteristics. So perhaps I can thank my girls only education. But it's important what you say. I mean, I made a mistake. Of course, you're not removing the boys from their lives. And in my day, that was, I mean, I didn't go to a convent school. There was a convent school down the road. But in my day, we weren't allowed to mix with the boys. We were almost afraid of boys. I didn't have a brother.
Yeah.
And for me, that sticks out as a sort of a bit of a negative memory. But that's just not the case today.
No, it's really not. And actually, if you look at co-ed classrooms, you'll often find, I mean, I have a 14-year-old boy. He doesn't hang out with the girls unless you make him. You know, actually at that age, they do tend to naturally separate. They're all interested in who's got a girlfriend, who's got a boyfriend, of course. But, you know, my son has girlfriends and I say, what do you do? And he says, well, we don't meet up at school. And that's the thing, they sit separately. He thinks it's torture when his teacher sits them girl, boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, in order that the class is behaving well and mixing.
And the girls presumably at that age just think all of the boys are stupid anyway.
And smelly probably, but they'd probably be right. I know. I love teaching boys, and I think that's the thing. I have worked in co-ed. I love teaching boys, but the liberation of girls is what we see.
Did you say your son is in? Is he in a boys only school?
He's not. So for me, controversially, I believe in girls only for girls, but I believe in co-ed for boys. So that's where I am as an educator. Just my opinion only.
Why?
I'm sure lots of people would disagree with me. I just feel that the boys are the soft skill development for boys happens better, and the research historically has shown that boys develop in different ways. But I absolutely know that lots of boys' school colleagues would completely disagree with me and say that boys being liberated from girls and being able to concentrate and focus would be, so it's just my personal opinion.
Interesting. Do we know the news yet? Are Kate and Will's sending George to Marlborough? Was that announced?
I don't know. I haven't been following it. Been following it.
They were considering a number of schools, but of course the royal family, typically they always go to Eton, right? Boys only.
They do.
So that would be a groundbreaking decision to go to a co-ed school.
It would.
A number of the schools, I mean, obviously we're going to get into the financials in a minute. Well, maybe now. I mean, VAT.
Yep, sure.
Private education is not cheap and it's just become quite a bit more expensive.
Yeah.
So in case people who are listening, watching don't know, then the Labour government has introduced VAT on school fees from January this year. But there are other financial constraints and restrictions that they have introduced as well. I mean, what are your thoughts on the whole debate?
Yeah, I think it's a real shame. And we are, the Independent School Council are challenging it legally.
Yes.
Children's goods and services have never been taxed. I'm thinly veiled fury that has been referred to as a tax break.
It's not a tax break.
It's not a tax break. Education has never been taxed. It's illegal to tax it in many places.
Is it illegal? Because I stated it was unlawful in a post recently. Somebody picked me up on that because I'm not sure what they're taking it all the way.
So in Europe it was unlawful and they've never taxed children's goods and services, but they're making a change to make it the law in the UK. And I just think it's really short-sighted. I think one of the things that I object to the very most is the lack of warning that parents had. Because
it was originally for September 2025 and so mid-year.
And also mid-qualification, mid-GCSE, mid-A-level, it has meant that people feel trapped. We're talking about a Prime Minister who didn't want his own son's GCSE journey to be disrupted and made some interesting decisions around that, I'm sure you saw, and yet is in theory happy to disrupt the education of those children that are already with us. And I think it would have been far more compassionate to perhaps, if they were going to introduce it for new entrants. But I also think parents are being taxed twice. And that's how I feel as a parent.
Of course, 100%.
Because I'm not taking my state school place that I'm paying for through my income tax, but I am paying again.
We've been taxed on the money as we'd earned it and then taxed again. I mean, what have been any implications in your school? What have you seen? Yeah,
I think what we've seen, because people are so happy with the Truro High education, they're hurting, absolutely. It's been a journey for them. We've stood by them. So through the pandemic, we have tried to keep our fee increases very low, and we've successfully done that. So we rationalised our costings way before this happened. So we've kept them low through the pandemic, through what we call the cost of living crisis. And now with VAT, we have yet yet again try to absorb some of that for our families. Truro High, you won't be aware of our fee structure, I'm sure, but we are deliberately trying to keep our boarding fees lower because we want the global mindedness for our girls. So in terms of boarding at Truro High, it's actually about £32,500 a year, which is significantly lower than a lot of boarding schools in the UK. When you add VAT, we're about 39.
So what percentage did you add on from this term?
So what we did was we rolled back our fees. So we actually rolled back in January to the fee structure that we had previously. So in real terms, we had to pass on around 15%. But actually, it looks like 20% on the website because the actual fee rolled back, if that makes sense. And what we did was try and absorb as much as we could. But ultimately, Ruth, we weren't overcharging our families to start with. We were keeping our education as affordable as possible to widen as much access as we could.
But your costs haven't gone down. Your costs have actually increased with the national insurance contributions and the removal of the business rates.
And also the increase in teachers' pension contributions. There's been a huge amount of change, but we're determined to make it as affordable as we possibly can. And our boarding, with that, we've included things like the weekend trips are absolutely included. So,
but is there not an argument for charging international students more to subsidise the domestic students?
I don't think so. And we don't take that. The only thing that we do differently is the level of deposit. And that's it purely that the domestic and international deposit is different. And that has been born out of some families choosing to reserve a place in the UK and the US and then deciding at the last minute where they're going. And so just to give us a little bit of chance to then refill that space. It's only happened to us a couple of times, but actually we want our boarding to be full so that we have that lovely atmosphere for the girls.
Is the boarding predominantly international whilst the day students are predominantly domestic, or how does it work out?
Yes, so we do that deliberately. So we have, well, you say that, about 40% of our students are British, but some of them are from Hong Kong and British. Some of them are from of Ghanaian heritage, of Kenyan heritage, but have British passports as well. So there are different people from different backgrounds holding British passports. We're around 80% British as a school. And so to have that global mindedness, a lot of that will come through our boarding, but it's about having the right mix in boarding and having the right characters in boarding. That's really important to us.
That comes down to best fit.
Exactly.
That we talked
fit
about earlier.
Is so important to us. We don't just take those students who might perform the highest academically, but who are going to be an absolute fit for Truro High School.
Why would you decline a student?
Controversially, if they don't want to get involved in the community. So those students that are reluctant to say, I'm going to get involved and I'm excited about the opportunities. For us, it's a family atmosphere in boarding. So that willingness to come out of your bedroom, to engage, to maybe go paddleboarding, to try surfing for the first time, to get on a horse, to learn to ride a bike. So all of those wonderful things that actually most of the students who apply are excited about. For us, that wouldn't be the case. We wouldn't necessarily want those children. And also the ones that are hankering after big city bright lights, who are down in Cornwall. It's
Truro,
not big city bright lights. We don't have designer stores. For us, it is a gentler pace of living with brilliant academics. But for those that want that big city life, whilst they can go up to London during the half-term breaks.
What's the travel time?
So it depends how you go. You can fly in 45 minutes.
From Exeter Airport,
from Newquay.
Newquay Airport.
Small airport, just so some of our boarders fly in and then fly down. But we also go up and pick them up in the minibus. So, and we don't have exi-out weekends, so we make it easy for families that way.
Yeah, and I think that choosing a city or a country school is a really important decision as well, because I think
people often talk about the distance to Cornwall, and they say, "Oh no, we couldn't possibly do that. She's just flown in from Asia, and then she's got to get on a minibus and go down to Cornwall. It will make the travel time so big." But when we talk to our girls, they say, "No, absolutely, it's worth it. We love the school, we love the atmosphere. You wouldn't get this."
To be honest, if you're on the outskirts of London, trying to get out from the airport to there once you're stuck in traffic is kind of same.
And it's a really easy journey. And the girls chat and they sleep and they snooze, and we stop in Exeter to but allow them to get some delicious food. So.
Right. I just want to ask a bit more about, a British education. And we haven't really talked about the curriculum, but I think that's pretty standard. In terms of what do you think are some of the key characteristics of a true British education? Sometimes I sometimes describe it as being a little bit proper and a little bit traditional. So I'm interested to go back to those proper and traditional characteristics before exploring the more modern ones.
Yeah, I think in terms of being proper and traditional, the thing that we expect is that we expect the children to behave well. We expect them to care. We expect them to, these are sort of traditional things that I'd like to think all parents would expect. Respect is a core value. But actually, beyond that, anything is possible in a British education. And I think for us, we are proudly forward thinking. So I was identified last year actually as a thought leader in education and celebrated as a head selected from around the world. And we have been selected before for in terms of awards for being innovative in our approach to education. But we never forget that traditionally children need to be able to speak well. They need to be able to communicate. They need to be able to problem solve. They need, oracy is so important to us, and we start that really young. Those are the kind of bits of the traditional education that are really important to us. To be able to communicate well in writing, whatever form that might be.
With pen and paper.
Yeah. Because actually these are the things that will endure.
Yeah. I read a cute statement that your younger girls understand that pushing their chairs under the table to tidy up and is very important. That's what's expected. And I just like that. That to me really does speak of British respect. Like you said, I've seen I visit schools as you do. I don't know if you still visit a lot of different schools.
I do, absolutely. I think it's the best way to get ideas and to celebrate good practice and build connections. But I think when people come and visit Truro High, they're amazed by the atmosphere. It's the one thing we hear. Anybody who walks through the door loves it.
So how would you describe the atmosphere?
It's warm, it's collegiate, it's a sisterhood. They celebrate each other. It's cool to learn. It's cool to be kind. It's cool to do well. It's cool to embrace opportunity. They dash from the academic learning to green power, car engineering to we have an amazing dance show and the have a go culture. 80% of our girls choose to be in this huge dance show that we do every year. It's super inclusive, and that just reflects how comfortable the girls feel. But every girl will look you in the eye and have a chat. I mean, people talk about the girls, one of the things they worry about, they say, are we socially awkward because we go to a girls' school? The nation tells us that girls in girls' schools will be socially awkward. They won't be able to talk to anybody. And I say, well, when people come in, are you scared to talk to them? Because I don't see that. And they say, oh, no, absolutely not. In fact, they lead conversations and they're happy to talk to anybody about what they're doing. And there's a joyful atmosphere. I think the overriding feeling is it's calm, but it's joyful. And they're relishing the opportunities and they're grateful. They're grateful. And so, it's a joy to work there. But they want it. They help us manage the ethos. They will be very quick to say if they think people are being rude or disrespectful in any way because they really value what they've got.
And it must happen. I mean, you must get bullying cases or what's your process? How do you find it out and how do you deal with it?
Yeah. Any school that says there's no bullying is not telling the truth because young people will always push boundaries. And it's about, for us, the idea of bullying is about power seeking. So we believe in positive parenting. We believe in looking what's behind the behaviour. The behaviour is communication of something. So we're not going to dismiss it. Of course, we're not going to say that makes it okay. But we have a really positive culture where we engage with the girls really actively. We train the girls in something called Girls on Board. So that's really friendship coaching. The older girls we train in mental health first aid in the workplace and they work as peer mentors. So if we have a girl that's struggling with a girl who might be struggling to be kind sometimes because she's power seeking, and actually what we'll do is connect her with an older student that might have felt that way in year 9 as well. Those tricky teenage years. We'll put in some coaching with the school counsellor for them. But we also make sure that we say is zero tolerance. Zero tolerance doesn't mean the child is leaving immediately. It means that we will always act. And we hear even the quietest voices. We've got a system called Whisper, and they can report anonymously if they think that somebody's being a bit mean or being a bit spiky, and giving them the language. So with the girls on board training, they can talk about how, they can, rather than say you're being a bit mean, they'll say, oh, she's behaving a bit like an alpha at the moment and we're not sure why. Or this girl's messaging, and passing messages between people. We're not really sure why, but it's making us feel uncomfortable. And they're so good to get help and to have little meetings that are called girls on board meetings, where they talk about what's going on, and build empathy. I think with statistically, if you build empathy with somebody who's being unkind for the people that they're impacting on, it solves it in around 95% of cases. And the 5% that's usually something more complex going on that needs counselling. So for us, we just say, absolutely zero tolerance. We will continue to act until it stops. We want to know, and we keep checking in. If there's been an unpleasant situation, we will keep checking in. But actually, we survey the girls anonymously all the time. We survey the parents all the time as well, because children will talk to their parents. And the statistics around Truro High and what they experience. So they say that they don't really experience that much unkindness. When they do, it's dealt with really, really effectively. So we're really proud of that. It's actually one of the things I'm most proud of, the culture in school.
And then you mentioned that, we talked about wellbeing earlier, but you did mention there might be something more complex going on. Do you have, they're teenagers, right? So we do hear some really sad stories. Depression absolutely. Is not, how do you handle, you've got in-house counsellors? Yeah,
so just one, actually, we're in all honesty, we're a really mentally strong school. I think that's partly to do with the lifestyle that we have. We actively buck against the culture of comparison as well, which erodes their well-being. We put in a huge amount of pastoral education for the girls. So that idea that they can talk to anybody, they can get help, it's okay to not be okay. We constantly talk about it. We have the wellbeing journal. And again, that shows them that we've invested in their well-being, but trains them in positive mental health habits every day, recording what you're grateful for, what you're proud of, a culture of celebration in school as well. We talk about in assembly all the time about how strong women build each other up and they build community. And so all of that, I think, promotes positive wellbeing. We get them outside. We've got after school, we've got surfing, we've got sailing, we've got paddleboarding, we've got kayaking, we've got climbing, and actually being outside. Teenagers are reluctant to go outside. And then when you get them outside, they don't want to come back in. We have things in our curriculum that build confidence. And so, yes, there are wobbles. Yes, there are times that it goes wrong, but we have amazing pastoral support. Mentoring from the older girls, as I mentioned. We've got our school nurse who's our mental health lead, and she's a registered general nurse. So brilliant. We have a school counsellor if we need it. But also just the girls know that all of the teachers are trained in a trauma-informed approach. And we're really proud of that too. So in terms of the girls who struggle the most, it tends to be ones coming in from outside, and we work to support them and to build that confidence.
Just sort of teething problems or having a bit of a wobble when they first start and getting acclimatized.
But I think having that amazing sense of belonging, knowing that you have a voice, knowing that people are going to listen, and being solution focused. I think, unfortunately, one of the things that I would say is that sometimes on the internet, children are encouraged to wallow in echo chambers.
For sure.
And trying to break them out of those echo chambers to lock up. We give all of our girls iPads, but we run it through our own filtering system, even when it's at home. So, we know what they're doing and what's going on.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about the anti-comparison. And also we touched earlier, you've taken the school out of the league tables. So just tell us a bit more about that.
So controversial in Hong Kong, particularly, where I know league tables are really
parents
important.
Parents pay so much attention to the way that we know that a lot of parents do choose a school is by simply looking at their A-level grades and their university placements, and that's the most important factor. But we know it's not really the most important factor.
Not at all. And actually, we were the top small school in England when I made that decision. So in the league table of the year, which was 2018, we were the top small school in England. Exactly. Yeah. And we used that as a platform. And actually it was driven by our students. And I'm so proud to say that, because we listen to student voice. And they were saying, well, Mrs. Matthews, you talk about being holistic. You talk about valuing people as individuals. And yet those league tables look at who gets an A and an A star. And then they used the example of one of the girls that was in the current year 13 at that time, and she was on the England hockey pathway. So she had an England hockey debut in year 13. She was doing 3 A-levels, and she was also playing hockey for England and doing hockey BTEC. And she had worked her socks off to go from Ds, which were her cognitive ability, to Bs. Now, you can't tell me that's not a success. She was working as a peer mentor in the school. She'd done Gold Duke of Edinburgh. Holistically, she was an amazing communicator, phenomenal resilience. Her soft skills were off the chart. And academically, she had grown and grown and grown. And that child was incredibly successful. And yet in the league table, she wouldn't appear. And for us, actually, when we came out of the league tables, our A-level results increased. They improved, but they're different every year. And I think our cohorts are really different every year. And we are not super selective in terms of girls coming in. We're proudly a growth school. So we work with a system called high performance learning, which is based on the idea that all children can achieve highly. It just takes time and scaffolding for them to do so. And so for us, the HPL philosophy is that we grow children. We grow and grow and grow them. And so value added is amazing at my school. If I take the example of one of the girls who's currently in her first year studying medicine, she got 2 grades higher than her GCSE profile said she should get in all 3 of her A-levels.
So should we not be compiling league tables of value added scores?
Yeah, I really think that that's the kind of thing that people should be taking into account. Yeah. And, there are many big name schools, big name boarding schools that people would recognise more because they take lots of boarders a year that have come out of the league tables, like Eton, I believe, like Cheltenham Ladies, like Sherborne Girls. So there are lots of top schools in the UK that have chosen not to be part of that culture. And so we were Small Independent School of the Year in 2020. Last year, we were shortlisted. We were finalists of Girls' School of the Year, top 6 girls' schools in the UK. It was won by a day school, actually, great day school. And so that comparison of kind of what school is doing it holistically, what school is allowing children access to incredible opportunities, not just who performs best in those exams, is really vital for us. And it's that idea that many people choose us because they have daughters that fly through the middle, daughters who are not seen in the state sector, who are not super high performing or desperate for help, but those middle children, and they're the ones that we proudly grow. So of course they go on to great things. We send girls every year to top universities. This year we've got offers from Oxford, from Exeter, from UCL, from St Andrews. Are
they different this year? Some schools are reporting.
No, not for us. No. We're still waiting for some.
Yes, of course.
But
were the
we've been delighted.
The same this year as in previous years for the last?
Well, we've done really well, so we're really delighted. And what we've been delighted with is the grades that our girls have got to get there. So,
of course, because they're not out of the woods yet, even with an offer. The UCAS system,
some of the offers are lower than we'd expected, and that's been great. And I think it reflects the quality of how well our girls represent in interview. We're 100% AA star at EPQ, for example, and they have been for a few years. And that idea that the girls can research for themselves, they can set their own title, they can drive their own learning, they can speak with confidence about things that they've researched. I think that's what allows them to stand out in those interviews, and the flexibility in their thinking, their ability to critically think, and they're all attributes that we're actively teaching, overtly teaching at Truro High with the high performance learning philosophy. So we think it makes a difference.
So we're almost out of time. I want to ask you, what's wrong with British education?
Oh gosh, that's a really tough question because I love it.
But nothing's perfect.
Yeah, nothing's perfect. I think what's wrong with British education, I think it depends where you look. I think some in some forms of British education, they're not putting the emphasis on the arts that they could. We believe the arts are absolutely vital. We've got amazing textiles technology, for example. One of our girls from Hong Kong actually won the one scholarship per continent that a top arts university gives every year. And again, that's so important for her. We feel like the arts are not just a way of increasing creative thinking, but creative doing, but also creative thinking. What else? Children, the lack of emphasis. I commented on LinkedIn this very morning, actually, about oracy in the curriculum and giving children the chance to develop oracy and build confidence through that. And skills-based, I think at the very top, there's been a real focus on what certificates can we gather when actually the focus needs to be on what skills and learning habits and habits of mind are the children developing.
Yeah, I mean, do you think, what's wrong with state education specifically? We talked on the large class sizes.
Yeah, I mean, I would say things like the testing culture. Our prep school, we don't do SATs. We don't think it's important to do SATs. For us, it's about the individual journey and
this
that growth.
Is for children from state primary schools trying to enter into grammar schools, and it's
a statewide initiative that they sit these, and in my opinion, it can narrow the focus in those final, really exciting, when it should be really exciting, really vibrant in the end of primary years. And we should be focusing on developing that confidence that will see them through the wobbly teenage years. And they're focusing on maths and English. And that is what I hear from my state school colleagues. And we employ a lot of people, a lot of talented educators that come out of the state sector because it feels like a hamster wheel. And that
from a teacher's perspective.
And not valuing the child as an individual and seeing their unique strengths. Whereas in the independent sector, we've got a little more freedom to do that.
Of course. Are they proposing that maths and English be continued through to 18, or was that in the previous government?
That was Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that was perhaps, dare I say it, controversially based on adults making decisions about children. And this idea that, people saying that maths isn't celebrated in schools. My girls love maths. They love maths. My junior school just last week won a Southwest, they were top school in the Southwest for a sum dog maths competition. They were so excited about it. It's these solving maths puzzles and trying to strategically work out how they could be the winners, which they ultimately were. But also A-level maths is really popular for my students. And I think what they needed to look at is, how are they sucking the joy out of maths education?
Well, they suck the joy out of my maths education, I can assure you. And I feel it has to happen in primary, but I don't subscribe to the idea that some children are not good at maths.
No, they're all no. And that's high performance learning through and through. It's that idea that if you put the right environment in, every child can do everything. They really can.
That's a good soundbite to end on. Thank you, Sarah. It's been fascinating to have a chat with you. If people want to find you, we'll put your contact details and the school website in the show notes.
Perfect.
Just want to ask you, for parents who are considering a UK education, there are a couple of resources, books or podcasts or videos that you can direct them to that you would recommend?
I would say, so there's a book called Great Brains and How to Grow Them. And that, I think, will, in a nutshell, put what we believe in the British education system together. I'd say follow Ruth Benny. Absolutely. And speak to you. But no, nothing particular. I think everyone needs to do their homework. Don't go where your neighbour goes.
Yes.
And I think that's really vital, because there are gems of schools. I mean, the Good Schools Guide says about my school that we could not do more for our girls if we tried. I know you've seen that. And many people have not heard of us because we don't have that many borders. But don't be afraid to investigate schools for yourself, and to ask to meet key people. I meet all families personally if they want to online, so that they can talk to me about my school and talk about the education. So really think about your child, really think about who they are, look for schools that have strengths in that area, and really engage with experts like yourself, but nothing in particular that I can recommend.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. It's been very interesting.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.